Right, yes. What we'll do is we'll finish up the muscles and then we'll do a lot of practice. Okay. So remember last class I was telling you that the one of the weirdest ones is how the bicep is a radial joint supinator. And so you have this little tuberosity, the radius right here. And I tried to explain how in anatomical position, it's kind of straight, but then as you pronate, you kind of wrap it. So like, in other words, I thought of a different way to look at it. When I pronate, you see the little blue notch now on the backside. So the biceps brachii gets spiraled around on the inside. So when it pulls, it's going to unwrap. It's going to pull in the direction of unwrap. And remember, you have all of your video clips. So if you want to pull this up on Moodle, I'm going to show you kind of how it works visually. This one kind of needs a little extra visual. So watch how it's on the inside of the radius. And so it's going to pull in a direction of supination. There. It gets longer as you pronate. It gets shorter as you supinate. And then we have the brachioradialis, which we call the midway muscle. We're going to do a lot of examples of that one today. Now all we got to do is talk about the all the time pronators and supinators, as well as our elbow extensors. There's that brachioradialis in a midway semi-prone position, so there's no spiral. I call it spirality, but there's no obliqueness. Then as we pronate or supinate, we have obliqueness. We're going to come back to this one to do some examples. So brachioradialis. All right, let's go to the back of the elbow. One way I like to remember that we have the triceps brachii, which everybody's heard about, and then we have this little muscle called the KNES that crosses the elbow posterior humerus to ulna. Remember, if a muscle pulls on the ulna, it's not going to be trying to spin the radial ulna joint. If it's pulling on the radius, it's going to have potential radial ulna joint function. So humerus to ulna. One way I like to remember is that, like, our elbow, again, is like our upper extremities version of the knee. You have your triceps brachii, and then you have your anconeus, which kind of makes like a quad of your elbow. So your triceps brachii. So you have your medial head, you have your lateral head, and then you're going to have this long head. So the green would be the long. You're going to learn that that crosses up into your shoulder. You have a medial and you have your lateral. Again, it's kind of like our vasti muscles. That's our version, where you have a medialis, a lateralis. But in this version of upper extremity, you have a medial head, a lateral head, and then your long head would be the upper extremities version of your rectus. So all three heads blend into a common tendon. Triceps tendon crosses the elbow posteriorly, inserts on your olecranon, which I mentioned last class is nothing more than a unevulsed patella. All it is. So your elbow extensors, you have your triceps brachii. Now remember, this is this is exam 2 concepts. When we say biceps brachii, when we say triceps brachii, when we say biceps femoris, and we end it there, that infers what do all the heads do together. And only when we separate the specific heads, hey, only the long head does this. So when we say triceps brachii, that's what do all of the heads do together? Elbow extension. When we get to the shoulder, we'll say the triceps brachii long head does this. And so we'll differentiate. We'll say long head and we talk about shoulder function. Just like we did at the hip. There's the medial. There's the lateral. And there's the long crossing the shoulder. All right, let's go back up to make sure I covered all of our bases. So we did our elbow flexors. Brachialis, which is deep, biceps brachii, piggybacks on the top. And then our brachioradialis. So when you're doing curls, just remember you're working more than your biceps. At the end of class, I'm going to talk about how radial ulnar joint position affects different bicep muscles. Those are 3 primary elbow flexors. In grad school. You learn that the pronator teres has a little bit of effect, but remember, my job is just to give you the major ones, the ones most involved. Elbow extensors, triceps brachii and KNES. Pronators and supinators. We have the midway muscle, the brachioradialis, which is a pronator when you're in quadrant 1, and a supinator when you're in quadrant 2. And then we have our all-the-time pronators and all-the-time supinators. Guys, these are the easiest muscles you're going to have because they have function in their name. I wish all muscles had function in their name. Like adductor longus, adductor brevis, love those. So you have your pronator quadratus, pronator teres, and then your supinators. Take a look at it. So here is your pronator teres. This is in a supinated position. So I'm going to show you with my fingers the origin and insertion. So the origin is kind of like on the medial epicondyle, crosses over to the radius. So remember we were talking about like doing a spine board roll? So this muscle pulling on the radius would be a pronation puller all the way across. That's how it works. Pronator teres. Your pronator quadratus is going to be distal. That's like if we were spine boarding, they would be on the feet, like pulling on the feet. The ulna is fixed. The ulna can't move in the transverse plane about the humerus. So that's why the pronator quadratus has an anchor on the ulna, and it's pulling the feet of the radius in a direction of pronation. This muscle, guys, I'm telling you, some students will miss it just because it lives close. That's like saying you can live, just because you live in the western part of Louisiana doesn't mean you live in Texas. So what I mean is that this muscle lives close to the wrist, but it doesn't cross the wrist. Does that make sense? But it should make sense. Again, if we're spine boarding the radius, it should make sense that it's pulling the distal radius to wrap it around the distal ulna. So the pronator teres and the pronator quadratus are pronation pullers the whole time, all the time. They're constantly trying to wrap the radius about the ulna. And then the best muscle in all of the land, the supinator. You literally have a muscle called the supinator. It's awesome. So the pronator teres was kind of on the medial part, trying to wrap The supinator is going to be on the lateral part trying to unwrap. Look at it right here. See how it would be trying to unwrap the radioulnar joint? You got your pronators trying to wrap, your supinator and your biceps brachii trying to unwrap. So what I want to emphasize is you're all the time, doesn't matter the position, supinators, all the time supinators. So in other words, if you're doing your exam and you identify you need supination muscles, supinator pullers, you're going to have the all the time supinators, your biceps brachii and your supinator. And then we'll see if you're in a radial joint position to recruit the brachioradialis. If you need pronators, you're going to have all the time pronators, pronator teres, pronator quadratus. And then we'll ask the question, am I in a position where the brachioradialis can help? That's how I want us to separate this. You have your all the times, and that's how the test question is going to be. On the test, when I give you a pronation supination question, I'm going to give you a pronator, and then I'll say with brachioradialis or without brachioradialis. That's how I'm going to give it to you. Okay. So let's look at our circle, and then we're going to circle back, no pun intended, to that brachioradialis. So our circle is a right-sided circle. It incorporates both the elbow joint and the radioulnar joint. Remember, if your device is flat on your desk, it literally is how it would be in your body. A cross section. On the board, we're just taking that cross section and we're rotating it so that we can see it. But it would literally be like this. Anterior muscles are flexion pullers, posterior muscles are extension pullers. This bowl is on both axes, so they're neither anterior, posterior. I hope your elbow doesn't move laterally. That would be a bad day. So these muscles are only pronators and supinators. The brachioradialis is a pronator on your circle because we're in anatomical, so therefore we're in quadrant 1. That's why it's a pronation form. And then we need to learn, we're going to practice, we need to learn that if we get past semi-prone, that brachioradialis becomes a supinator. So 3 flexors, 2 extensors, 2 sometimes 3 pronators, 2 sometimes 3 supinators. Does everybody understand? And we're going to practice. We're going to practice. Let's go to this one. All right. Let's go here to here. The way I want you to set this question up is agonist and contraction. And then say, would brachioradialis be in a position to help my agonist? We're going to do here to here next. But let's just start here to here. And I know some of you, and I love it, your brains, you're like, well, wait, I'm in a semi-prone position. So let's literally do 99.99% of this motion. So in other words, right before you get to semi-prone. So that way there's no confusion once you get to midway. As always, feel free to discuss with a partner or someone close to you, someone far away from you. It's getting weird, no? All right, guys, do we need pronators or supinators to make me pronate with an external force that's trying to supinate me? Absolutely. We need pronators. We're going to have two all the time pronators. Pronator teres proximally, pronator quadratus distal. And now what we're going to do, we're going to play everybody's favorite and exciting game can the brachioradialis help my team? Well, I'm in quadrant 1 from here to there. And I need pronators. Remember on Wednesday, I was like, if you need pronators, then you're in quadrant 1. That doesn't mean if you're in quadrant 1, it's going to work. If I need pronators and I'm in quadrant 1, brachioradialis, it's like, dude, I can help you. So yes, brachioradialis would be part of my pronator group from here to there. Does that make sense? If I needed supinators and I was here, brachioradialis is like, dude, I can't push you down. Sorry, I can only try to pull you up. Okay. From here, so let's say B, A, B, C. B to C. Now again, I understand. Well, technically, so let's go right. I tip it right past 90. I'm at 91 degrees. Here to there. Agonist, all the times, and then the question of brachioradialis. And also work in contraction time. Gravity is trying to pronate me, right? So I wouldn't need pronators, I'd need supinators. I'm going to have two all the time supinators, biceps brachii and the supinator. And then I got to ask myself about the brachioradialis. The brachioradialis can be a supinator in quadrant 2. So it fits that criteria. I'm in quadrant 2 and I need supination pull-ups. So absolutely the brachioradialis can help. This is kind of cool. You're doing a full range of motion, but in half of the motion, you're working pronators concentrically. The other half of the motion, you're working supinators eccentrically, but the entire range of motion, you're working the brachioradialis through different contractions, concentric and then eccentric. Guys, practically speaking, all that is this. I have a string and I make the pipe come up and then I let the pipe go down while still pulling back to the middle. That's all that happened with the brachioradialis. Concentrically helped to bring the hammer here and then eccentrically let the hammer go down from there. Make sense? Some of you may be wondering, well, when would we ever, use pronators from or supinators from? Well, we open things all the time. So you could use pronators from midway, practically speaking. But if I need pronators from midway, all I'm going to be using is teres and quadratus. If I use supinators from midway, I'm just going to be using biceps, brachii, and supinator. It's not to say you should or shouldn't. I'm just explaining that the brachioradialis cannot push us from midway. It can only pull us through midway. Here is a question that I typically ask on the test, and it's a judge-free zone, but somebody's going to miss it, unfortunately. Not one of you guys. I'm sure all of you guys are going to get it right. I'm going to ask, I think it's in the PowerPoint, so I may go to the PowerPoint, but I can find it here. Yeah, here we go. It'll be a question like this. So guys, whether you're listening to me now in class or you listen to this video later, I'm gonna ask this question. And telling you somebody is gonna tell me that I'm working biceps. It's gonna happen. And I'm telling you why it's gonna happen. Because they're gonna say, elbow flexion must be bicep. Because my ACE certification says bicep does flexion. Does that make sense why some people wouldn't want to say that? I understand why they would want to say that, but I also think we could both all acknowledge you ain't working bicep in this exercise, right? So we can't fall for the temptation of emotion with specific muscles. Gravity's trying to flex you. I don't need flexion pullers, I need extension pullers. Who are my extension pullers? Triceps brachii and conius. When it comes to understanding contraction, triceps brachii and conius doesn't tell me direction of pull. So I need to retranslate it back to the group pull so that I could say extension pullers do flexion through eccentrics. Now, you may be able to do it with the muscles. That's cool. But I'm giving you a surefire way to help see those contractions. So what are the muscles? Gravity's trying to flex me. I need extension pullers, triceps brachii and conius. What's the contraction? The extension pullers in this case are going to allow flexion through eccentrics. If I go from here to here, extension pullers are going to do extension through concentrics. Who are the extension pullers? Triceps brachii and conius. So it's hard to say anconius does flexion. To me, it's easier to say anconius is an extensor, and when it's working, extensors do flexion. Extensors do extension. That makes sense. Let's see what kind of examples I have in the old PowerPoint. This is another, trying to find a single one. Hey guys, let's do something like this. First of all, how rude of it. Do we have any questions or clarifications about any of the stuff so far? Okay, let's do something like this, which again is probably simple for where you guys are at now, but it can be confusing when you kind of add elements of difference. So let's look at both arms, both elbows. And in one case, one elbow is going to flex while the other extends. So that in itself might trick you, confuse you. You know, we're not mirroring, we're going in opposition. But logically, you should say, well, gravity's still trying to do the same thing. We also need to remember it's their left and right, not our right or left. So someone might miss it because they're like, well, wait, I thought the right was doing. So this is all reminders. So let's go from here to here. Now, yes, we're working the same muscles, but the same contraction's not happening, right? So that's a good practice. So let's analyze both elbows, right and left, and tell me agonist and contraction from here to here. And then after this, I'll get into the different radial ulnar joint positions and how and why that works different flexors. Y'all have some fun with me. Hey, Dad, are you in the hospital? Hey, Pop, are you in trouble? Pop, did you get arrested? Dad, did your butt call me again? Dad, he's 80 years old. Pop, Dad, is this a Halloween joke? All right, I love you. Definitely a polka dot. When he calls, though, you got to answer because he's old. So you just want to make sure everything's all right. Dad will call me on accident and he'll be like, oh shit, I'm sorry, that was a butt dial. And then 5 seconds later, his butt done dial me again. It's the most amazing thing. But you got to answer just in case. All right, you guys. We agree that we're working flexors for both, right? Good. Who are the flexors more than just the bicep? I mentioned this in 310, but I'm going to remind you, the movie Coco, you have two deaths, literal, and then when no one else remembers you anymore, you have a second death. So if all we ever do is say bicep, 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 we forget about the brachialis and the brachioradialis. And just like in a car, any part could go wrong, and that's why you need a mechanic to know how the different parts work. I don't know how all the parts work. We are biomechanics. We are biomechanists. We need to know how the different muscles work because there could be a problem with any one of those muscles. That's why it's important. It's okay for the general public to say bicep, 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 but we need to know the other muscles, okay? So biceps brachii, brachialis, brachioradialis, cool. Right elbow is concentric, because flexors do flexion concentrically when they're working. And the left is going to have eccentric, because flexors are going to allow extension to eccentric. Have some fun. So radial ulnar joint position and emphasis of different elbow flexors. I taught you passive insufficiency last week, or maybe it was this week. Remember when we did and it was because your finger extensors were getting stretched here, 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 and here, and they were so tight that they were literally pulling your fingers away from being able to grip out. Their length was so long, it was getting in the way of the other muscles working efficiently. Today, I'm going to teach you a concept called neurological insufficiency. It's a fancy term to basically say you are choosing not to recruit that muscle as much as you could because you don't want to cause an unwanted secondary effect of those muscles. Give you an example. Your biceps brachii is an elbow flexor and a supinator. So if I have a dumbbell, it's Halloween. If I have a dumbbell and you know gravity's trying to extend me, I need flexors. But you also know that if that dumbbell is balanced, first class, right, balance, it doesn't take a lot of force to supinate. It doesn't take a lot of force to spin the log on the water. It takes a heck of a lot of force to raise the log from the water. But in terms of spinning it around its polar axis, it doesn't take a lot of force at all. So here's your flexors, and your biceps brachii and your brachioradialis are supinators in this position. True, your biceps brachii is an all the time supinator, and I'm in quadrant 2. So if I use them too much, I'm going to have this motion, which can easily happen because it's not doing any linear work, it's just rotation. Now, some people may do this and work that bicep a little more. But if I'm in a prone position and 2 of my 3 elbow flexors are trying to supinate me and I don't want to cause supination, I'm going to lessen their innervation on purpose. I'm going to purposefully not recruit those flexor supinators if I don't want supination. Does that make sense? So if I'm purposefully lessening the innervation of 2 of my 3 elbow flexors, guess which elbow flexor has to work a little bit more? Brachialis. And y'all have heard that before, right? This position emphasizes the brachialis more. That's why. Let's do a secondary position. Let's do a hammer curl. You're in a semi-prone position. Biceps brachii can still supinate from here. Brachioradialis can't. Brachioradialis is sufficient. So in this position, brachioradialis is I could pull as much as I want. So that's why a hammer curl would emphasize brachioradialis more. I'm not saying all those muscles are off. I'm not saying that at all. In a anatomical supine position, can't go any further. So in this position, you can really recruit that biceps brachii as much as you want because it has no secondary radial ulnar joint function in anatomical, fully supinated. But your brachioradialis does. So it's going to lessen its contribution. Now, again, I'm not saying that all 3 turn off. You actually can recruit flexor supinators based off of what you can neutralize. They call those muscles neutralizers. So in other words, if you're doing prone curls, you're actually going to turn on pronator quadratus and pronator teres to try to neutralize the bicep supinate. But obviously, biceps brachii is a little bit stronger than your pronator teres and pronator quadratus. Does that make any sense? So in a fully supinated position, you can crank out that biceps brachii and not have any unwanted radial ulnar joint function. In a fully prone position, there's only one muscle that you can yank with as much force as you want, and that's your brachialis because it's pulling on the ulna. So that's why a prone position would emphasize the brachialis a little. Semi-prone would emphasize the brachioradialis a little more because in a semi-prone position, it doesn't have any radial ulnar joint function. So on the test, it's not about who's off and who's on. They're all on. It's just you have limits of recruitment when you don't want to have secondary functions. Does that make sense? So brachialis emphasized because it has no supination pull. Brachioradialis would be emphasized because it no longer has any radial ulnar joint. And in a fully supinated position, using that biceps brachii, because you're at the end of the road, so it can pull as much as you want. It's not going to cause any more because you're at the end. Once we get closer to the test, I'll communicate specifically how I would ask questions. That's called neurological insufficiency. You're choosing not to recruit a muscle based off of it having other motion functions that you don't want. You got a question?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, so since I know as well that the biceps breakout
Mhm.
helps with shoulder flexion,
Yeah.
flex, if we put our arms on something
Yeah.
prone,
Yeah.
we get even more like
Ah,
breaky
what a great question. So
not breaky.
if not, you're good. You're good. I think it was Monday or Wednesday. I said, guys, the upper extremity doesn't follow the length tension of our lower extremity as much because we're much more dexterous up here than down there. So if you were to be in a preacher setting, fully supinated, shorten the bicep at the shoulder, which we're going to get there. That's why we haven't done it as an example because I haven't taught you technically the shoulder crossing yet. You can have limb tension influence. However, neurological insufficiency supersedes limb tension. What I mean by that is the neural recruitment of the muscle is more important than the elastic length of. So, in other words, if I'm prone, technically the muscle's lengthened. But if I'm doing dumbbell curls like this, I'm still not going to recruit it as much because I'm choosing not to innervate it as much, if that makes sense. So, in other words, let's say I have one dumbbell and I'm here and I'm prone, so I lengthen it at the radioulnar joint. Well, even though it's lengthened, that's only affecting its elasticity, right? The TheraBand component of the muscle. You still have the stuff that I zap with neurons, right? With the electrical neuron to say, hey, pull more. So my point is that even though I may stretch the TheraBand more here, if I don't zap that muscle, it's not going to pull as much. So if I'm choosing to not innervate it because I don't want this, now if I want this, then I could recruit the bicep more. But if I don't want supination, I'm going to choose to not recruit it as much, and therefore I won't be working it as much, even though it's long.
Okay.
The contractile component supersedes the inert length in that example, because it doesn't take a lot of force to do this. Now, if you wanted to flex and supinate, biceps brachii is like, yeah. But if all you wanted to do is flex and stay pronated, the bicep is limited. It's like it's on skates. And when you're fully supinated, it gets to kick off the skates and really yank. It's a great question. All right, guys, let's do some practical examples, because sometimes, as you know, it's hard to find specifics. So I'm going to give you some radioulnar joint questions, and you practice saying agonist and then brachioradians, okay? So let's say I am doing, Grace, would you come home? Let's see. Okay, Grace, I need you to supply an external force this way. So push on the pipe, not too much because I'm old. Okay, Grace is applying an external force. Okay, I'm going to push against her external force and I'll slowly let it go down. Okay, now again, yes, gravity's trying to do this, but she's pushing more than gravity. Okay, so that's why I wanted to emphasize that external force. Okay, so one more time. Start, we're doing a rehab exercise. Slowly go down. Okay. So we're going to do agonist based off of external force. We're going to have some all the times, and then we're going to have the question about the brachioradian. Ready? Go. Thank you, Grace. Thank you for not pushing too hard, because that made a contraction foot real quick. Check in pops. Hey guys, external force that Grace was supplying was trying to do what to my radial undulate? Good. So I need pronation pullers. Don't worry about the radial right away. Build your confidence. You know you have all the time pronators. Pronator teres, pronator quadratus. Building up that confidence. Now we can have the conversation of, can the brachioradialis play with that team? And the answer is no, because the brachioradialis can only be a supination puller in quadrant 2. It cannot be a pronation puller. Does that make sense? It can't push me down. It can only pull me up. So in this case, I wouldn't, because it couldn't. And if I did this, if Grace came back and pushed this way, she'd be trying to pronate me. I need supinators. I'm going to have all the time supinators. The supinator. Biceps brachii. Once again, brachioradialis is like, dude, I'd love to help, but I can't push you down. So on the test, I might give you a number. I might say, how many agonists, how many supinators here? How many pronators here? How many pronators here? How many supinators here? Make sense?
It's kind of confusing, but the way that I see it, just to help people out.
I love different perspectives.
It's like, it's always gonna be trying to bring you back to.
That's right. That's
So
correct.
like, no matter where it is, if it's not trying to pull you back to midway, then it's not.
Correct. I just want to make this clear for everybody else, because I know you see it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's always working, right? But in terms of its pull, 100% correct. Absolutely. Because we give muscles function based on their pull. It doesn't matter if they're working or not, right? So I just wanted to add that nuance that it's true. It's always pulling to midway, but that doesn't mean it's always working to pull to mid. Just wanted to clarify that little nuance, but you're 100% correct. And in grad school, even though I didn't hold you accountable, it's the same with the rectus. The rectus in anatomical is straight, but if I twist to the right, now it's like an oblique trying to pull me back to midway. And if I twist to the left, pull me back to midway. So how great, when I'm twisted to the right and I need some extra help to slow down my motion, the rectus is like, dude, I could be a left transverse puller. And when I'm twisted to the right, it could say, hey, I could be a right transverse puller. It's like being able to double dip with some of these midway muscles. It's a good perspective. I like it. There's really only so much I can do with flexion and extensors, all right? So are we good with that? Obviously, if you have any questions, you could see Grace or see me. But on Monday, we'll start on the shoulder. And all we have left is shoulder and scapula. And that's it. Y'all have a good Halloween, guys. Y'all be safe. Just remember, if a teenager comes to your house, just give them the candy. Just give them the candy. Let them be teenagers.